In this video, we dive into 5 zookeepers mauled on camera, from a saltwater crocodile attack in Indonesia to an enraged elephant's assault at a Kenyan wildlife center. But first, we begin in central Romania, where one keeper's morning shift ends in the enclosure of a 540-pound Siberian tiger that was never supposed to be there. It was April 7th, 2015, and the air across central Romania carried the damp chill of a season still struggling to turn. A regional municipal zoo on the outskirts of a mid-sized city opened its gates to a mostly empty parking lot. The morning air smelled of damp concrete and animal feed. Budget shortfalls had reduced the staff to a skeleton crew. The zoo housed a pair of Siberian tigers in an outdoor enclosure connected to an indoor holding area by a heavy steel sliding gate. The enclosure itself was a rectangular concrete space, roughly the size of a tennis court, bordered on 3 sides by high walls, and on the 4th by a viewing gallery that had been closed to the public for months due to structural concerns. Maintenance logs dating back over a year had flagged the gate's latch mechanism as unreliable, noting that the bolt did not always seat fully into its housing, leaving the gate dependent on friction rather than a fully engaged locking pin. Replacement parts had been requested, but never approved. Dragomir Petrescu, a 54-year-old senior keeper, had worked at the zoo for over 2 decades. His long tenure had earned him the trust of management and the deference of younger staff, but it had also produced a familiarity with routine that had dulled his attention to protocol. Dragomir had cleaned the tiger enclosure hundreds of times without incident, and that repetition had become its own kind of danger. The zoo used a lockout board system to track animal locations during cleaning. Before any keeper entered an enclosure, the corresponding animal was to be shifted into a holding area, the shift marked on the board, and a second visual confirmation made through the holding pen bars before enclosure entry. On this morning, Dragomir checked the board and saw the shift marked as complete by a colleague from the earlier feeding round. After decades of routine, he relied solely on the board marking and skipped the visual verification. With 2 keepers absent that morning, Dragomir was covering the enclosure alone. He collected his cleaning equipment and entered the outdoor enclosure. The mark on the board had been made in good faith. The colleague had initiated the shift, guiding the male tiger toward the holding area with feeding cues. But the gate's latch had not engaged fully. The tiger, a roughly 540-pound captive male, had initially moved into the holding area, but subsequently forced the partially latched sliding gate open with its head and forelimbs, re-entering the outdoor enclosure. Liviu Aldea, a 31-year-old junior keeper assigned to the big cat section within the last year, was carrying supplies toward the enclosure from the service building when events began to unfold. Siberian tigers, also known as Amur tigers, are the largest living cat species, with captive males commonly weighing between 400 and 660 pounds. They are ambush predators that strike from behind, targeting the neck and base of the skull to compress the throat or damage the cervical vertebrae. Their bite force can exceed 900 pounds per square inch. In captive settings, tigers retain all predatory instincts regardless of years of human contact, and attacks on keepers are almost always triggered by proximity in enclosed spaces where the animal's ambush instincts activate. The tiger had re-entered the enclosure silently, moving along the concrete wall on the far side. Dragomir, facing away while hosing down the floor, did not see the animal. Based on the scene reconstruction conducted by investigators, the tiger closed the distance rapidly and struck from behind, the full weight of the animal hitting Dragomir in the upper back and knocking him violently to the concrete floor. The tiger's jaws clamped around the back of his neck, maintaining a crushing bite while attempting to drag him across the concrete, compressing the carotid arteries and trachea while the canines penetrated deep into the neck musculature, causing catastrophic trauma and rapid loss of consciousness. Liviu reached the perimeter fence moments later and saw the attack in progress. He triggered the emergency alert system and shouted toward the service building. Staff began arriving within roughly a minute. The combined commotion from vehicles, air horns, and shouting eventually pushed the tiger toward the holding area, where it was secured, but the damage had already been done. Dragomir lay motionless on the enclosure floor. Emergency medical services ambulances were called immediately, but the zoo's location outside the city center meant a response delay of approximately 20 minutes. Dragomir Petrescu was pronounced dead at the scene. He had survived 23 years working alongside some of the most dangerous predators on Earth. The investigation by local prosecutors and workplace safety authorities determined that the gate latch mechanism had failed to engage properly, and that the zoo's lockout verification protocol had not been followed with adequate rigor. The facility was cited for multiple safety violations. The zoo's internal CCTV system had captured the enclosure from a fixed overhead angle. Local prosecutors seized the footage as primary evidence in the workplace negligence investigation. The footage was retained as evidence during ongoing legal proceedings and has not surfaced publicly. While Romania's aging zoo had delivered the most permanent consequence of a faulty latch, the wildlife rehabilitation centers of East Africa would soon demonstrate how quickly a trusted relationship with the largest land animal on Earth can collapse without warning. It was September 14, 2016, and the landscape of central Kenya stretched brown and still under a cloudless sky. A mid-sized wildlife rehabilitation center operated along a shallow river valley, housing 9 elephants rescued from failed private reserves and human-wildlife conflict situations. Odhiambo Karithi was a 58-year-old head elephant keeper who had worked with the center's animals for over 15 years, including daily hands-on care conducted within arm's reach of the elephants. The center still used free contact management, a legacy practice that allowed keepers to work in the same space as the animals without barriers. His confidence in his ability to read the animals, particularly the oldest male, was absolute. The male in question was a 40-year-old elephant rescued from a collapsed private reserve over a decade earlier. He was the largest animal at the center, standing over 10 feet at the shoulder, with thick, deeply scarred tusks that spoke to years of conflict before his rescue. He had been manageable under free contact handling for years, responding to vocal commands and tolerating the physical proximity of keepers. But over the previous week, staff had observed subtle changes. Temporal gland secretions appeared as faint, dark streaks below the elephant's eyes. His behavior during handling had turned occasionally irritable, and a slight increase in urine dribbling had been noted. These were early signs of must, a hormonal state that could transform even the most docile male elephant into an unpredictably aggressive animal. Odhiambo, who had managed the elephant through previous must cycles, assessed the signs as preliminary and not yet requiring isolation or increased distance. He continued the morning washdown routine, entering the enclosure with a hose and brush. Wekesa Njau, a 27-year-old junior keeper and Odhiambo's trainee for the past 2 years, observed from behind the enclosure barrier. African elephants are the largest land animals, with adult males weighing between 10,000 and 13,000 pounds and standing up to 12 feet at the shoulder. Males periodically enter must, a hormonal state in which testosterone levels can rise 20 to 60 times normal levels, producing extreme aggression even in animals with decades of human contact. Physical signs of must include temporal gland secretions, strong odor, and continuous urine dribbling. Early must is often misjudged by keepers because behavioral changes can escalate unpredictably. A single head strike from an animal of this size can throw a person several feet, and the crushing force of a single footstep is easily sufficient to collapse a human ribcage. The washdown proceeded normally for several minutes. Odhiambo worked along the elephant's left flank, running the brush across the animal's shoulder while the hose sprayed water over its back. Then the elephant's behavior shifted. The animal became rigid, its enormous ears flaring wide, its trunk rose and curled. Odhiambo recognized the change immediately and began backing toward the enclosure gate, moving slowly to avoid triggering a charge. The elephant closed the distance in only a few strides. The massive animal slammed its head and tusks forward, driving Odhiambo against the pipe barrier separating the enclosure from the service area. The pressure was immense and immediate. The elephant stepped stepped back, and Odhiambo collapsed to the ground. Before he could move, the animal brought a front foot down on his torso with its full weight. Wekesa triggered the emergency alert and attempted to redirect the elephant using vocal commands the animal had responded to throughout its years at the center. The elephant did not respond. Its attention remained fixed on the figure beneath its feet. Staff arrived with a vehicle and noise deterrents, eventually driving the agitated animal to the far side of the enclosure. Emergency medical transport was called immediately, but the center's rural location meant a significant delay before paramedics arrived. Odhiambo Karithi was pronounced dead at the scene from unsurvivable crushing injuries to the chest and torso. The investigation by Kenyan wildlife authorities determined that the keeper had continued free contact handling despite early signs of musth, and that the facility lacked a written protocol for musth stage assessment and mandatory distance escalation. A visiting international researcher had been filming the elephants from an adjacent observation platform when the incident occurred. Kenyan wildlife authorities confiscated the footage as part of their investigation. The footage remains sealed as government evidence and has never been publicly released. While Kenya's rehabilitation center had lost its most experienced keeper to a bond he trusted too deeply, a small zoological facility in the Republic of Georgia would soon reveal how a single miscommunicated word between two staff members could send a young man into an enclosure with a bear that was never supposed to be there. It was October 22nd, 2014, and a cold rain had been falling over a regional city in the Republic of Georgia since before dawn. A small zoological facility on the city's northern edge opened for another sparsely attended weekday. Puddles had formed along the cracked pathways between enclosures, and the grounds were empty of visitors. The facility housed several Caucasian brown bears in adjoining enclosures. The zoo had been built during the Soviet era and received minimal upgrades since, its service corridors narrow and poorly lit. The bears were shifted between outdoor areas and indoor holding pens through manual gates operated from the service corridor. Communication between keepers relied entirely on verbal confirmation. There was no lockout board, no written shift log, and no redundant verification system. Zurab Lomidze was a 29-year-old keeper hired approximately 8 months earlier. He had come to the zoo from agricultural labor in a rural district outside the city, drawn by the modest but steady salary. He had no formal zoological training, his orientation consisting of several days shadowing a senior keeper before being assigned to the bear section independently. The morning routine required cleaning the bear enclosures while the animals were secured in holding pens. A senior colleague was responsible for shifting each bear and verbally confirming the lockout. On this morning, the miscommunication was simple and fatal. The senior keeper believed the shift had already been completed by another staff member who had passed through earlier. He relayed this assumption to Zurab as confirmation. No one had actually moved the bear. Zurab unlocked the service door and entered the narrow corridor between the inner wall and the enclosure's rock features. The Caucasian brown bear, a roughly 380-pound adult female, was still inside. Brown bears are among the most powerful terrestrial predators in the northern hemisphere, with Caucasian brown bear females typically weighing between 250 and 400 pounds, and males exceeding 450 pounds. Despite their smaller stature compared to some subspecies, Caucasian brown bears are exceptionally powerful. Brown bears are not typically predatory toward humans, but become extremely dangerous when startled at close range, particularly in confined spaces where escape routes are blocked. Defensive attacks are fast and violent, involving swipes from claws often exceeding 3 inches in length and bite force approaching 900 pounds per square inch. Most captive bear attacks occur during enclosure entry, when keepers mistakenly believe the animal has been secured. Zurab encountered the bear almost immediately. The confined space, less than 6 feet wide between the rock wall and the enclosure barrier, left no room for retreat. The bear, startled by the sudden appearance of a human at close range, reacted defensively. According to the scene reconstruction conducted by investigators, the bear lunged forward and rose partially onto its hind legs, delivering a powerful swipe that struck Zurab across the upper body and knocked him against the corridor wall. The bear followed immediately with a bite to his shoulder and upper chest. The crushing force caused massive tissue damage to his collarbone and the surrounding area. The attack lasted less than half a minute before the bear retreated deeper into the enclosure. stretcher, but the injuries sustained in the confined corridor were unsurvivable. Staff heard the commotion and reached the service door within roughly a minute, but were unable to enter safely until the bear was lured into the holding pen with food. Zurab Lomidze was found unresponsive in the corridor. Emergency medical services were called, but the injuries were incompatible with survival. He was pronounced dead before reaching the hospital. He was 29 years old and had worked at the zoo for less than a year. The investigation determined that a verbal miscommunication between staff members had resulted in the keeper entering an unsecured enclosure and that the facility lacked any formal lockout verification system. The zoo's single-functioning security camera had captured a partial angle of the corridor entrance. Georgian authorities reviewed the footage during their investigation into operational negligence. The footage was retained as evidence while the case remained active. The zoo closed permanently within the following year, and the footage remains restricted in court evidence archives. While Georgia's crumbling zoo had claimed its youngest keeper through a failure as simple as a misunderstood word, a city-run zoological park in Brazil would soon demonstrate that even the most carefully planned veterinary procedure can become a death sentence when the margin between sedation and consciousness is thinner than anyone in the room realizes. It was July 18th, 2017, and a steady drizzle fell over the grounds of a city-run zoological park in São Paulo State, Brazil. The zoo maintained a small collection of big cats in aging but functional enclosures, and its veterinary unit was equipped with a CCTV system that recorded all procedures. Reinaldo Cerqueira was a 47-year-old senior big cat keeper who had worked with the zoo's lions for over 12 years. His role extended beyond daily care into direct involvement with veterinary procedures, where his familiarity with the animals made him a critical member of the medical team. He had assisted with dozens of sedation-based examinations over his career and was regarded by the veterinary staff as one of the steadiest handlers in the facility. The procedure scheduled for this morning was a routine dental examination on the zoo's oldest male lion, a 16-year-old animal weighing approximately 450 pounds. The veterinary team prepared a tranquilizer dart calibrated to the most recent recorded weight from the last immobilization several months earlier. The dart was delivered from outside the enclosure, striking the lion in the hindquarter. After nearly 15 minutes of observation, the lion remained motionless on the enclosure floor. Multiple reflex checks, including jaw tone, palpebral reflex, and corneal response, showed no reaction, reinforcing the assumption that the lion was fully sedated. The team, led by Reinaldo, entered the enclosure. The dart had not fully discharged the intended dose, leaving a shortfall in the sedative delivered to the animal's system. Compounding this, the lion's current weight exceeded the outdated record used to calculate the dosage. The result was a lion sedated to a level that mimicked full unconsciousness, but sat dangerously close to the threshold of arousal. African lions are apex predators weighing between 330 and 500 pounds, with adult males capable of sudden, partially coordinated movement, even from apparent rest when sedation is incomplete. Their bite force exceeds 650 pounds per square inch, and their retractable claws can inflict deep lacerations with a single swipe. In veterinary settings, incompletely sedated lions represent one of the most dangerous scenarios for zoo staff. The transition from apparent sedation to full alertness can occur within seconds, particularly when physical stimulation triggers an adrenaline surge, pushing the animal out of the sedation plane. Lions under light sedation often appear fully immobile until direct contact provokes a sudden defensive response. Reinaldo assisted beside the veterinarian near the lion's shoulder, stabilizing the animal while the veterinarian worked near the head. The dental examination began and continued for several minutes without indication of any problem. Then the lion's hindquarters twitched, a single, distinct, muscular contraction that rippled across the animal's flank. Reinaldo noticed the movement immediately and called out a warning. Before anyone could withdraw, the lion's eyes opened. Its body convulsed into motion, sluggish at first, the movements uncoordinated from the partial sedation, but escalating rapidly as adrenaline surged through the animal's system. The lion reacted to the closest movement. Reinaldo was directly beside inside its shoulder, his hand still positioned near the animal. The lion's mouth clamped onto Reynaldo's forearm with crushing force. Simultaneously, a front paw swept outward, claws extended, striking him across the chest and the side of his neck. The lacerations opened deep wounds across his upper torso. According to accounts from the veterinary staff, Reynaldo remained between the lion and the rest of the team as they scrambled toward the enclosure door. Whether this was deliberate positioning or the result of the lion's grip preventing him from moving could not be determined with certainty. Staff outside deployed a second tranquilizer dart, but the supplemental sedation required time to take effect. In the intervening seconds, the lion inflicted critical injuries to Reynaldo's neck and upper torso. The veterinary team evacuated through the enclosure door. By the time the supplemental dart took full effect and staff re-entered, Reynaldo Cerqueira was unresponsive on the enclosure floor. He was pronounced dead at the scene from severe lacerations and bite trauma to the neck. The investigation determined that the initial sedation had been incomplete due to the dart not fully discharging and an inaccurate weight estimate. The zoo suspended all sedation-based procedures pending a comprehensive protocol review. The zoo's veterinary CCTV system had recorded the incident in full. Brazilian federal prosecutors subpoenaed the footage as part of a workplace safety investigation. The victim's family subsequently petitioned under Brazilian privacy law to block public distribution, citing dignity protections for the deceased. The footage remains sealed in federal records and has never been released. While Brazil's zoological park had lost a 12-year veteran to a margin of error measured in milligrams, the privately operated reptile parks of Southeast Asia would soon deliver the starkest reminder that some animals do not offer second chances and that the distance between a routine performance and a fatal mistake can be measured in inches. It was January 15, 2013, and the heavy tropical air of eastern Java hung over a privately operated reptile park on the outskirts of a coastal city. The facility catered to domestic tourists and small international groups, and its main attraction was a dominant male saltwater crocodile measuring over 15 feet in length. Bagascoro Witaksono was a 44-year-old headkeeper and primary show performer. He had conducted the demonstration hundreds of times over the previous 6 years, developing a routine that balanced showmanship with the practical mechanics of feeding a 1,200-pound predator. He knew the crocodile's rhythms, how long it would rest between lunges, where it preferred to surface, and how close it would come to the platform edge. His confidence around the animal was a product of repetition, and that confidence had made him the park's most reliable draw. The afternoon demonstration drew approximately 40 tourists and local visitors, many of them families with children pressed against the viewing rails above the enclosure. Bagascoro worked from a raised concrete platform extending over the enclosure pool, elevated roughly 4 feet above the water's surface. A single low metal bar ran along the pool-facing edge, designed more as a visual boundary than a functional safety barrier. The platform surface, routinely splashed during demonstrations and coated with residue from fish and raw meat, had become dangerously slick. No non-slip matting or textured coating had ever been applied to the concrete. Bagascoro used a long pole to dangle chunks of chicken above the water, provoking the lunging strikes that audiences came to see. The 15-foot male responded with characteristic aggression, its massive body surging upward to snatch at the suspended food. Each lunge sent water cascading onto the platform, further coating the already slippery concrete. Saltwater crocodiles are the largest living reptiles, with dominant males commonly exceeding 15 feet in length and weights surpassing 1,200 pounds. They possess the strongest bite force of any living animal, exceeding 3,500 pounds per square inch in large individuals. During active feeding, saltwater crocodiles enter a heightened predatory state in which any movement near the water's surface triggers an immediate strike response. Their attack sequence involves an explosive lunge, a clamping bite designed to secure the prey, and a death roll, a violent spinning maneuver that disorients the victim and can tear limbs or tissue as the animal spins. Once a saltwater crocodile has locked its jaws onto a target, the grip is nearly impossible to break without without mechanical intervention. Midway through the demonstration, Bagascoro stepped back to reposition for a different feeding angle. His right foot landed on a section slick with water and fish residue. His footing gave way instantly. He fell sideways, his upper body pitching toward the pool side of the platform. His hip struck the low metal railing, and his momentum carried his torso over the bar. His right arm dropped within inches of the water's surface. The crocodile had been tracking movement on the platform throughout the demonstration, its predatory responses primed by repeated presentations of food at the water's edge. The sudden appearance of a limb within striking distance triggered an instantaneous response. The crocodile's jaws erupted from the water, clamping onto Bagascoro's right arm just below the shoulder. The immense bite force crushed through tissue and bone. The crocodile wrenched him sideways over the railing and into the pool before dragging him beneath the surface. The animal immediately initiated a death roll, its massive body spinning violently while maintaining its grip. The rotation pulled him under repeatedly, churning the pool into a froth of brown water and foam. Staff rushed to the platform edge with long hook poles and catch poles, striking at the crocodile and attempting to force a release. Audience members later described repeated attempts to reach Bagascoro, but the crocodile's size and the turbidity of the water made effective intervention impossible. The death roll continued in cycles. The animal would pause, reposition, and roll again, dragging Bagascoro beneath the surface each time. Staff eventually drove the crocodile to the far side, using sustained percussive noise and long poles. The effort took several minutes. When the water finally settled, Bagascoro Wicaksono's body was recovered from the shallow end. He had died from a combination of fatal bite trauma, drowning, and blood loss sustained during the prolonged death roll. The investigation by Indonesian authorities determined that the platform lacked adequate non-slip surfacing and functional safety railing, and that the facility had no written emergency protocol for keeper immersion during feeding demonstrations. Multiple audience members had recorded portions of the incident on personal phones and cameras. Indonesian police collected copies of all footage from witnesses as part of their criminal investigation into the park's safety standards. Authorities requested that platforms remove clips uploaded in the hours following the incident. The park's owner, facing criminal charges and civil lawsuits from the victim's family, obtained a court order suppressing remaining visual evidence. No complete footage has surfaced publicly. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.